Okay, well, I'll start over again. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is Monday, January 13th. It's a joint meeting of the Beal Reuse Committee and the Board of Selectmen. We're here this evening, obviously, to talk about moving forward with a plan for an RFP for the Beal School once the new school is open. Well, let me just take care of one housekeeping issue. For the Beal Reuse Committee members, we have the minutes from the July 8th meeting. Could I have a motion to approve those, or unless there's any comments?
Ms. Lynch, can I make an amendment?
Yes, you can.
Motion to approve with one correction in line item 4. About halfway through the third or fourth sentence, it says members started. It's supposed to be a typo. I assume it's a typo. Members stated that the Board of Selectmen meeting, et cetera, et cetera.
Members, oh, mine says it right.
Yeah, mine's just stated.
What, the next one? No, yeah.
No, there's two stated back to back.
Oh, I see, okay.
Second sentence after that.
Okay, we'll make
Over on the
that,
right.
okay, I got it.
Typo. Other than
Okay,
that-
so we have a motion.
Second, Mrs. Lynch's
with the
motion,
amendment.
correctment, yeah.
Okay, any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? So voted. Okay, tonight we have Claire O'Neill from the Mass Development and two of our consultants who are going to take us through the process. So what we're going to do first is Nate has a presentation to make, and we'll move into our next phase, and then they'll lead the discussion on this, and then we'll move into discussion about things that we'd like to see, so.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to remind folks and for the folks at home, my name is Nate Kelly. I work with the Horsley Witten Group, and we have been doing planning work on and off with the town of Shrewsbury for about 4 years now, I believe. To my right, my colleague, Catherine Madden of Madden Planning, who's brought on the team because she has particular experience with the municipal surplus site selling, say that 3 times fast, and developing RFPs for those types of things. Did you want to say anything, Catherine, about your experience?
No, I think that, well, I will just say, yes, I have worked with Claire before and with Mass Development, and I seem to be quite focused these days on moving public buildings into reuse and all the sort of procurement issues that go with that.
Okay. And then also part of our team who is not with us tonight is John Tremontozzi from Landwise Advisors, who has a smaller role in this, but brings considerable expertise in all matters of real estate, and is just going to help us as a group think about the market opportunities, limitations, challenges, unique characteristics of this property and what you can expect as you go forward. So we'll bring him in a little bit later on as we get more into the details of pulling this together and speaking and soliciting from actual developers. So tonight Catherine and I are going to sort of split the stage here and go through a brief presentation for you. Again, a lot of you have been involved with me on this through the town center study, but I'm going to just go back in time a little bit for everybody's benefit, for the benefit of the folks at home, and talk about just the highlights of the work that's brought us here, and then I'll pass it over to Catherine, who's going to talk about moving forward and going through the schedule, the process, what you can expect, and then setting up some key questions that we'd like to get some discussion on this evening. So with that, here we are at the Beal School property, and we all know we're dealing with a property that's just shy of 4 acres, with a building on there that was constructed and finished construction in 1922. And depending on what you read, you've got floor area between 31,000 and 33,000 square feet to work with going forward. Our firm and several of you in this room started our work based on this existing conditions report. So this was a key document put together by Lamero Pagano Architects, and Judith Nish engineers also worked on this. And this is just a great resource for, as it suggests, looking for what we're working with here. And this was an assessment of the property that looked at physical conditions, structural conditions, HVAC, materials, all of those things, the general condition of the building. And one of the takeaways from all of this work is that, is this building reusable? Yes, this building could be reusable, but it's not without its challenges. There are things that any developer and the town need to consider going forward. If there are considerations for adaptive reuse, some significant investment would need to take place. Moving forward to the town center study that Horsley Witten worked on. So as you recall, this was a study that sort of had two different lenses on it. One was looking at the town center as a whole and thinking about how the neighborhood, the district functions, where are its strengths, where are its weaknesses, where are things that could be improved, and then honing in a little more closely on individual properties, the Beal School being one of those properties, and thinking about the opportunities for that going forward. We had a fairly intensive engagement process where we brought people to meetings and we did a lot of survey work on that property to just really ask some very blunt questions to the community in terms of what the aspirations were, the hopes were for this property. Are you in favor of keeping the school? Is that a necessity? Or is it something that, you think needs to change completely on the site? What are the individual aspects of the site that are super important to the community moving forward? So from that work, from those discussions, the committee developed what we called a framework. And so if you look at the town center study, there's a moment in that study sort of further along in the document where 9 sort of key principles, key sets of values are articulated, and they're longer than what's here. This is sort of encapsulated for the purposes of a PowerPoint slide, but each one of these may be 1 to 3 different sentences that sets the stage for example, a developer who might be looking at this property with interest and asking the question, well, what's important to this community going forward? And maybe I'll just take a minute here to go through these because I think it's worth reviewing these. First, the town said that they want this project, first and foremost, to really elevate the town center. Like the town really recognizes that this is an opportunity to do something special, that this can really take the town center to another level in terms of the goals that are articulated in your community master plan about making this a destination. So this project really should be special. The second one basically said that adaptive reuse of the building sounds great. And if that's something that a developer is interested in, the town's interested in that as well, but it's not a necessity. The town, or the group that we worked with, the public discussion that we had, basically there was consensus that the project itself was most important. And if that means that you have to replace the building, then that's what that means. The public space in the front yard is very important, particularly the Veterans Memorial. So this was something that we looked at in different concepts that will show you how that Veterans Memorial could fit into different redevelopment schemes. And that similar to that the site should be active. So if there is open space in the front yard area, open space in the side and in the rear yard area, the design should be thoughtful. And it should be done in a way that draws people in, that makes this an exciting place, a welcome place to be, where a lot of different people can gather and do a lot of different things. The amenities on the site are meant to be shared with other sites, with the district as a whole. This site is seen as something that is, again, really important to the district as a whole. So if there is public space, if there's gathering space, then people should be drawn to that from other areas of the district. If the parking remains in place, which would seem that was important as a potential shared amenity for the rest of the district, that is something that a lot of different users should have access to in the open space in the southern end of the area as well. Again, shared space drawing many people, many visitors, many users across the course of the day. The street level uses in the building, whatever building that may be, new or reused, should be non-residential. Folks, again, along those lines of creating something that is active, something that could be commercial, could be institutional, could be community space, leave those ideas to the developer, but make it something, again, that is shared space, that has customers or visitors that are going in and out and creating vibrancy on the street level. The design of the site should be well-designed in terms of circulation. So this is a busy area. There are traffic issues. It's on the corner. It's in a weird spot. So the design has to be thoughtful in terms of how cars get in and out, how will emergency vehicles access the property, and then thinking about people on foot and people on bikes. Is it going to be safe? Again, if we're going to create something that's exciting for people to visit, they have to be able to get in and out and visit on all different levels, all different types of transportation. At the rear of the site where the baseball field is, keeping this area undeveloped seemed to be a priority for a lot of the people who were involved in our public process. Not necessarily keeping it as a baseball field, there could be different uses for that, but having that as an open space in the back area because it pushes into that residential area seemed like something that was important to folks. And then sort of as a checkbox, you're going to make sure you comply with all regulations as you're going forward. So this was really the framework that was set up in the town center study. I think it's important that we think about that again this evening, and we want to hear about if people have sort of changed their tune on this, or if this resonates. Is this still where you think we all are? Because obviously as we develop the substance of the RFP, this type of language is going to be central to that, setting the expectations for the development community. At the end of our report, we went through a series of just conceptual kind of cartoon drawings. Again, it was important to the group that we worked with and the people who were involved in the public discussion that we show a range of options, because part of what was articulated at the beginning is that the town didn't want to put the developer in a box, right? Developers can have interesting ideas. They want to be responsive to market opportunities. So let's not put the developer in a box, but let's show some different ways that this can play out. So on the left, just the building as it is. Maybe that is a possibility. The one on the right takes out the gymnasium space and adds something that's a little bit more usable onto the back of the building, but keeps the facade. To your left, a brand-new building, almost on the footprint where the school is now, keeping that activated open space, keeping the parking as a shared amenity. To your right, a new building that pushes up to the street front and engages along the sidewalk, so makes that a more active interface between whatever those ground floor level uses are and people who are just coming by on the sidewalk and pulling them in. And then finally, what would it look like if we had a few buildings, sort of smaller scale opportunities on the site with the parking in the rear and that open space towards the back? And then the report also showed a few concepts for different types of open space at the back end of the property. So the baseball field could stay as it is, if that's the preference of the community. You could add a playground, which is the second concept there, or a community garden might be another idea with garden plots in there. So again, having an open space area, but perhaps programming it differently depending on what the preferences are for the town. So that's a summary of sort of the work to date coming through. I'm going to pass it over to Catherine, who will sort of take us our first steps into the future.
Left.
Right there, yeah, right.
Sorry, right. Okay, and I, of course, jumping into this where you all have been talking about this for years, and here I am coming in cold. But part of what this is also, or what we've been hired to do, is to write an RFP. So it's important to have all the great work that Nate has done in terms of having had these discussions and thoughtful reflection on what's possible. But when you write an RFP, it sort of takes it from the planning phase into the transactional phase. And things that you could kind of say generally, this start to get a little bit more fixed to communicate to the real estate market, really, and to the developers. So that's the process we can begin tonight, but of course, as we draft the RFP, to be a little bit more specific about what we're looking for, what we as the town are looking for on the site. what I have up here is really the outline of an RFP, and of course, I look forward to always working with Claire, because Mass Development does a lot of RFPs as well, and so we'll want to, but generally, this is what's in a request for proposal. There's some amount, there's an intro, the project information is important in terms of defining the existing conditions, like what are you offering? Including whatever you're not offering, like if the baseball field is not part of it, we want to be very clear that this is what is on the table for the development community to look at, and whatever, things are taken off the table. I think it's important, you're really trying to sell, you're trying to generate interest in terms of getting the widest number of responses as possible. So one of the things is, what's great about this, what I call the competitive advantages, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But you're really positioning this of like, why this site? Why is this the best site? Like, why should a developer want to spend their time and money here rather than some other site? And then what public incentives are you, if any? Like if there's any, and that doesn't have to be money necessarily, but it might be like, oh, we'll put in the streetscape, or, all of those things. Those are things which we don't need to answer tonight, but we can start thinking about, like, what is the town going to do to make this project possible? If you think of public-private partnerships, and then what are you expecting the private market to do, more entirely? This third part there is really important, which is the project vision, objectives, and guidelines, and that is not only, the translation of the town center study. But it really, and perhaps fine tuning that also, like what are you really hoping for? And one of the things, I guess, to put in your mind, I flagged the language of like, we'll leave that to the developers to decide. But if that's like a public kind of benefit, like the developers they're not gonna provide that if they don't have to. That there's certain things that if you really want them, you have to say that they're a must, the guidelines, like you must provide this, like you must provide a bike lane or a sidewalk or something. You can't leave that kind of stuff up to a developer, because they may or may not think that that's an important thing to do. Right, so it really is all about communication and understanding which things that to be, fair, like you could go either way, like whether the building stays or not, and which things, like you really, as a community, as a town, want to go to the mat for, you must see on this project. And all of once we figure out what that vision and objectives are, it needs to track all the way through the RFP. For those of us who have submitted to RFPs, it's very confusing. I want to say super confusing. It's super confusing when the objectives are here, but the evaluation criteria are something completely different. So that's on us, once we figure out what those objectives are, is making sure that then it's consistently all the way through the, in terms of what the submission requirements are and what the evaluation criteria, so that you are sending the clearest possible message out to the market. And I think that the marketplace, and just jump in at any time if you would like, Claire, that they'll respond more positively if it looks like that we collectively have our act together. Okay. And one of the things that, you have an advantage is that, you have town-owned property, whatever the allowed scale and density, and then whether there is other public funding sources, including like Mass Works or other things that I'm sure we'll talk about, right? Okay. Okay, so I want to just go through this a little bit, those parts, the project understanding, setting that community vision. So if you look in the right column, So for instance, it's publicly available land. We want to be very clear about when it is going to come on the market, right? In terms of, so that's that, we'll get to the schedule at the end, but like what is the disposition date that we can project so that the developer, once they're selected, can count on that. They're going to work their whole schedule around when can they begin construction. So you want to be very clear about that. The building and site information, we have, thank goodness, great background information. The zoning update, which I understand is going on, but that's, I'm not, I don't know a lot more about that. But it will be important to be able to set, like, is this going to be 2 stories or 3 stories? Like, you know, what is the town willing to live with in terms of density? Obviously, from a developer's point of view, more density is better, but from the town's point of view, my experience is like, you know, it's not going to be 10 stories. You know, that there's going to be limits in terms of what that is, and maybe that's 2 or 3 stories. I don't know if 4 stories. You know, so we need to talk about that in terms of, including parking ratios. You know, like one of the things which you talked about is shared parking. Any amount of what the parking ratios are going to be very important in terms of then how that affects the density on the site. And so that community vision is going to be set like through our discussions here and any other community input, including the Town Center Association that is going to happen later this month. So we then will, from that, be able to, you know, communicate. That's our, you know, what's that vision objectives? What are the viable uses? One of the, I think we'll get to that later in the discussion, and, you know, thinking, especially thinking about, like, what would you definitely not want to see here, right? You know, that's an important thing to communicate as well, and where you're willing to sort of be open-minded about that. And then design guidelines, that's a whole like how prescriptive do you want to be on the design guidelines in terms of, you know, step backs or setbacks or build-to lines, or, you know, like how much do you want to define, you know, obviously some design guidelines get into whatever, color and roof, and, you know, we probably don't want to do that, but we want to, the things that we really care about, we want to capture in this document so that it doesn't, you're not ending up negotiating that later. It's like, oh, well, we really meant this. Well, if we really meant that, then we should say it as much as possible. You know, it's easier to say these things than to get everyone in a town to agree, but there you have it. And then the financial and legal structure. So have we talked about whether it's a sale or a ground lease?
That's just not.
Okay, so so, you know, all of those things in terms of, are we selling this outright? Are we going to own the land and sell the rights to it? We can, whatever those transactional legal structures are, we need to talk about, as well as the financial expectations of the project. So we'll come back to all of this. The community benefits. In my experience, so the list of 9, but in the end, because you end up negotiating with a developer, for instance, I always think it's important to try to get, like, what are the most important things? Like, what are the, like, 3 or 4 things that you really care the most about? And try to capture those, because if it's a laundry list of many things, the developer's going to try to push and pick. I'm being a little bit, is anyone in this room a real estate developer? Just the way negotiations work, if there's a list of 9, they'll pick the ones they want to negotiate you with. So it's better to be really clear about the 3 or 4 that you really want to hold to, and not put in a lot of things that don't have that same weight, for instance. So again, trying to set those, and this is just a sort of a long list of, like, what do we want for the businesses on the ground floor? And, are jobs an important thing for this community, or maybe not for this project? You mentioned cultural things, is that retail, restaurant, but, other kinds of cultural uses. Housing, if it's housing, the whole question of like affordability or rates of affordability or types of, is it rental or ownership, all of those things. I think it's important to have that discussion and know where you all stand, and then, and some of it you may choose to put in the RFP and hold the rest, to when you have someone selected, or if you're really clear about it, is documented in the report. We talked about the open space parking, and then finally, another last important part of a request for proposal is the financial plan, that you're looking for a developer that has financial capacity, that, has experience, that has done this before, that can finance the project. You want to be able to review their pro forma, which is, the pro forma is the spreadsheet that looks at cash flow over 20 or 30 years. And with Jan Tremontosi and our help is being able to evaluate that and see if that's someone that you have confidence is going to do a great job. Because in the end, this is a city-owned asset. And the first thing Nate said was it needs to be something special. And part of that is having someone that you want to work with really as a partner to carry out that project. You want this project to be successful. So you need a really solid partner, including, whatever third-party sources that may or may not be available to make it possible. And then, all of those things then get evaluated. This is the way procurement works in terms of disposing of a public property, is being able to have a very rigorous evaluation criteria. Obviously, this isn't filled in. That's our job, is to fill it in terms of, what you see as highly advantageous, what's advantageous and what is not advantageous. So again, you're sending a clear message to the development community of what you won't accept in an RFP, or which you'll sort of grade them poorly. So with that, I would love to open it. We have some questions for you, but before that, are there any questions that you might have on just some of the technical aspects of an RFP that we maybe like rushed through or that I didn't address? Yeah, Kristen.
If I could just set the stage a little bit about where we are in terms of time frame, so everyone's on the same page. Related to the rezoning process, the town has held 2 public forums, inviting the public in for their input related to what they'd like to see in the town center. One was held in November and an identical one was held in December. Currently, myself and the planning and building department staff are reviewing that input, and we are using a template that Nate and his team provided us with the visioning study to update what zoning changes would be necessary. We plan to present that to the Board of Selectmen in early February. And the planning department has been continuously updating the planning board on that work, because the planning board is ultimately the zoning authority in that sense. So certainly the discussion can continue this evening, but we hope to see a rezoning package go forward at the May town meeting, which I think begins May 18th this year, with public hearings leading up to that in March and April. In terms of the disposition of the land, Beal School, and Keith, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is set to open fall of '21. So the students would be vacating June of '21, and I would think that shortly thereafter, we would be able to dispose of the property. But there is a town meeting process leading up to that of disposing of the property for a certain value amount that we're working on that timeline with our town council related to the legal documents.
Okay. And can I ask you a question then about the zoning?
Sure.
So the zoning will deal with Beal School?
That is correct, yes.
And that'll set the rules for that, really, in terms of density, height, and
Correct.
parking ratios?
Yes.
Okay, so that'll be, we'll just incorporate that right in, and we will have that in time, or we'll have a good sense of that.
We'll have a very good
before
sense,
April.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. If the school, well, we'll get to the timeline, I have a timeline chart at the end about sort of between, the difference between when the school closes and when it's disposed of. That is an interesting question.
Well, it's not, yeah, it's the difference between a town meeting vote
Yeah,
to allow the selectmen to dispose of the property versus of disposing of the property.
yes, okay. Let's get to that at the end. Okay. Other questions about requests for proposals or the whole, I mean, I should mention it's all following state procurement, chapter 30B, I want to say, yeah. Okay. Okay, so if we don't want to go over old territory that you've been over, but there are a few questions that would be helpful to us to, as we put this together, to really capture your voices in this. One of them is, what do you think, when I use that term competitive advantages, people, like, what makes this site stand out more than any other, say, in the town of Shrewsbury or elsewhere in the region, frankly? But even in the town of Shrewsbury, what is great about this site that you would want a developer to know about?
Can I go first?
Certainly its size, and its location in the center. I don't think there's any other piece that's that large, near 4 acres, and it's right there at an intersection, so it's certainly got a view from the street. I think those are definite advantages.
Heavily trafficked area, linchpin of the entire center.
Okay, so heavily trafficked in a good way,
Yes.
in terms of visibility and,
Right.
yep, right, okay. Did you, Claire? Okay,
They've voiced it beautifully.
okay. How is this better than other sites?
Well, I think it's an opportunity for one of the larger issues in the center, in the usage of the whole area, is the availability of providing additional parking, which, whether it's in the front, back, or whatever, right now, a lot of the we've got properties right in the center of town which are just vacant, because there is no accessibility to them, no available parking. And this is gonna alleviate, would be more attractive to someone of that nature that would like to have some, whether it's a restaurant or any other services, gonna have parking. The additional thing is, if you get some residential, multifamily residences in the area that far exceed the number of vehicles that they were probably permitted for when they were first approved, because more people have more cars. And so you gotta take a look at whether or not you're gonna allow 24/7 parking for people like that to alleviate that sort of stuff.
In terms of resident parking,
And whether
From-
they're not even residents of that property, whether they're residents of other properties
Right.
that have nothing to do with Beal, but are gonna be wanting to, use of this pasture that's free.
right, so can I just say there's a bundled up in that, if I hear you right, a couple of things. A competitive advantage is that there's enough space on this site to have on-site parking for your, say, retail, like if it's a restaurant. Once we, and you may not have said that, but Nate raised it, if this is also shared parking for other uses in the center, that becomes not a competitive advantage, but in a way a competitive, it becomes a civic goal that you're kind of subtracting from the value of the site, either for that resident parking or
Yeah, and I don't mean to
off-site
say
parking.
that for properties that are dealing with people that come and go for businesses. It's more the long-term, that some of the parking you may think you're gonna get, you may lose because other residents are gonna abscond with it because they're gonna use it because it's available
Okay,
permanently around the clock rather than just during business hours.
yeah, okay. Okay, thank you.
Getting away from that a little bit, but one of the things that we are working on is with the Shrewsbury Town Center Association, is we've actually done a study and we're working on developing the concept of shared parking throughout the properties in the center. So it wouldn't it could become an issue, but if the shared parking vision comes through, it's not as much of an issue there, because there's a lot of parking in the center, much more than everybody thinks there is. Almost all of it's private. And Kristen could speak more to it, or maybe Nate, but we're not looking that to be the public parking for the entire center of town.
You're not. Yeah.
No, but we
Yeah.
want it accessible. We want parking there to have it accessible to somebody who's maybe would go into that building and then walk to one of the other buildings, one of the restaurants or whatever. We don't want to limit it just to what's on that site.
Right.
But if the shared parking thing does come to fruition, it becomes less of an issue there.
Right, especially if you're driving like foot traffic, and I have been in shopping centers where they blast you with megaphones if you leave the property. Don't take your car with you, so that's not what we want here. And can I, Kristen, would the shared parking be part of the zoning, do you think?
That is correct, yes. We are looking for that to be an element of the zoning.
Yeah, that's great, okay.
You get a natural resource in the ball field that I think most people are not gonna wanna see go away.
Yeah, so that's,
Because it's very, you know, if you really want to say that you're gonna attract some residents, folks on the southern side of the structure that have, you know, kids are going to school, and Patton School's just down the road from there as well. There's no other area in the area, you know,
Right.
for that sort of stuff, unless you go all the way down to Municipal Drive.
that may not be a specific advantage to the developer, however.
It may not be, but that's gotta be something that's gotta be fit into it that, you know,
So that's like one of those things we
I would
would
say, you
go
know,
to the
that-
mat for.
I don't know if you want to get into these discussions right now, but in the end, the reuse committee was, we're not going to stay locked into that, because
I'm sorry, say that again.
we want it open. We're not locked into that. I know Angela has different feelings about it because she needs a space, but we have other land in town. If we needed to, we could relocate that, if we needed to. But we don't want, I think going to the advantage, what we've envisioned, at least in the discussions up until this point, is this is a blank slate. You can do, we want to make this as flexible as possible with, you know, have ideas, but we don't want to make it so constraining that it's not going to make it as marketable as it could be. And there's going to be trade-offs, and one of them could be, and I'm not saying it will be, but one of them could be that ball field doesn't stay, because if we keep that ball field, that's going to impact the amount of parking we're going to need, because when they're having games there, those lots are full. So we're not limited to that. If we didn't have another place we could find for the ball field, which I'm pretty confident after working on the town-owned land that we have and what the restrictions are, that would be another story, but I don't think that's the case. And I don't know how everybody else feels, but we can't start from the get-go saying you can't do this, you can't do that. The only thing I know that everybody feels strongly about is that monument can't move. The World War I monument can't move.
World War I.
Sure.
When after our last series of meetings, we presented to the selectmen as a group, I articulated it, but it was the group's findings, a list of recommendations, and then a list of, the committee's findings of preferences on restrictions. I don't have that letter or that memo, I'm sure I could dig
It's
it up.
actually in your packet.
Oh, that's right, I do. And on that, there were a couple of notes. The only reason I bring that up is that would be helpful to work the way in. The ones that come to mind were, we didn't want, an auto shop in there, or a mechanic, or a restaurant, or a drive-through. By restaurant, I mean a fast food restaurant. So those were the things that the committee felt really strongly as restrictions. Beyond that, to your point, we were, whatever those were, and I'm not gonna go and find them on the list, if they're there, they're there.
But we'll find them, but that's, I'm glad you raised it, and I know Nate.
Okay, so whatever those were,
Right.
beyond that, we were pretty wide open, and I know there was a little bit of controversy on the ball field, but I know our recommendation was some sort of open, green, what I'll call community space, but not restricted to a ball field.
And I think that was really to create a buffer between the
Exactly.
commercial and the residential area.
Shame on me for not checking.
One of the other things
Yep.
that could be an advantage.
Prohibited uses, that's what I was
When we,
thinking.
when we started the discussion, the thought was this property had to be revenue producing, it had to be real estate tax producing. That's where we started. And as we evolved and realized that there might be uses or some combinations of, commercial and nonprofit, whatever, however you want to say it, that thing hasn't been tax producing for 100 years. And that perhaps we should be a little open-minded and think a little more holistically of what the project itself is going to do for the center. Because, not that we're going to have another library, but the library is not tax generating, and it creates a lot of activity in the center. So same kind of a thing, that we're not necessarily, at least at this point, maybe as the process evolves, we'll change our mind. But I think we're at the point where if there's a really good project that may not be revenue producing, but it's got a tremendous benefit for the center, maybe we would want to consider it. Maybe in the end we won't. But again, we're trying not to be that limiting.
So that would mean, like, writing it in such a way that a nonprofit organization could propose to come in and reuse it for a theater or something like that, say, or for a maker space, or like they might take the existing building and reuse it for something, more funky like that.
But
I mean, because the real estate developers aren't gonna come in
No.
and propose that,
No,
right?
but
Just,
it would have to be a strong proposal. I don't think if they just said we're gonna go in there and put art studios in there, that would be competitive enough in the final analysis. But there could be other ideas for nonprofit. There could be other ideas for nonprofit that would tear that down and build a new site. We don't know yet, but
right,
really want to keep an open mind.
okay.
There are some things, there's about 6 or 7 things we don't want. We don't want a gas station, but I mean, other
The
than
list is
that,
right here, Mo.
Right.
Large retail, gas, motor vehicle repair, drive-through, large-scale manufacturing, storage, adult use, and marijuana. Those were literally the 6 or 8 absolute
Pretty good,
no's.
that's good. I'm sorry, I think you had a comment.
No, I just would mention that one of the suggestions we had on design was, with regard to the Veterans Memorial, we did agree to either preserve it in its current location or a prominent location along Maple Ave. I think we
I almost jumped in when he said it, Mary
Some-
Beth, yeah.
thought
We said it could
I thought
move
we
20
backed
feet
away
to the
from
left
that.
or the right or be on the corner or something like that.
It had to
I
stay
remember
somewhere
that. I
along
thought
the
we
prominent
backed away
Yeah,
from
right.
that, but whatever.
We did,
Maple Avenue.
we put that in there just to allow
Yes.
flexibility.
Yeah, so it's the meaning of it that's important,
Correct, and we
not-
wanted
not
it
the
to be in a
land.
prominent
Yeah.
spot.
Right.
But if there was some reason to slide it down a little bit, we
Yeah.
wanted to leave that as an open concept.
And you don't want it way in the back behind the garage or anything.
Correct.
Right, or behind the whatever.
So
Wait,
just one
not
other,
there yet. Okay.
can I just, one other thing?
Oh,
Just-
please.
Just one thing that Mr. DiPaolo said in terms of a clean slate. I think an advantage or a competitive advantage is you're going to be in the heart of the town, really at the beginning of the revitalization.
Okay.
So they have that unique opportunity. It depends how you look at it. But if this is the beginning of the revitalization, if you look at it from an investment standpoint, it should only go up, right? Because what's going to follow from that is then additional developers would come in and look at their opportunities to develop the adjacent parcels as well, depending how slowly or how quickly it is. But there's not a lot of competition in
Right.
terms of there are only a couple restaurants. This is a real opportunity to set the tone of your own investment.
Yeah.
That will also benefit the community, that at this time, they will have that preliminary barrier to entry. They'll have the real estate and the opportunity to set their path before others can come in. So
Right.
they could, that'd be an opportunity that others will not have.
Yeah, right. They can be the catalyst to get things going.
Kind of first to market, Mr. Savior.
Yes, perfect.
First to market, okay. Others? Other comments? And what about disadvantages? I mean, just to be clear, like if you are a real estate developer or a nonprofit, and you can go anywhere in the region, like why would you go here? Like what do you, if you could put yourself in their shoes, why would they not want to be here?
Rush hour traffic.
Okay.
The traffic that was an advantage 20 minutes ago. You can put that in the other column now.
Could be an advantage or a disadvantage.
Right, okay.
Plus, we're not, it's
you
not
look at-
necessarily, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Okay, good.
It's not necessarily on any major, off of a major highway.
Right.
You know, you're gonna have to go a few minutes off of 290
Right.
to access it, but that's true of most of Shrewsbury.
So that's like not, it's not only not on Route 9 or whatever that might be, but it's not close to regional access.
It isn't, I mean, you would need to be going there. You're not necessarily going to be driving by it if you're coming from another community. And I know we are looking to sort of offer something that would draw not only residents from this community, but be something that residents would want to come to from other communities. But I think where we will draw from other communities is when people go to the library, because we all know that we have people coming from other communities to access our library. So I think now I've just taken that negative and made it a positive. If they
Yeah,
build it,
I
people
got
will
that.
figure it out
Right.
because we do already have that out-of-town traffic finding their way. So
Okay.
it could be looked at either way, I guess.
The other negative is the
Library is a
actual,
competitive advantage.
the actual lot itself. I mean, it's a big lot, as you said, almost 4 acres, but it's long and thin. The frontage
Right.
of the Maple Ave is slight in comparison to the size of the lot,
Right,
at least in my opinion.
short and long.
Yeah, and the other part is the backside on Wesleyan is extremely narrow road, which has been, the road in the street itself, because it's,
Tell me.
2 houses can be built on every lot, is overcrowded with cars already. And any free parking you put in there, it's gonna be subsumed by all the folks that have a more abundance of cars, because you can't even plow the sidewalks in the winter because the people are parked there already. And they're not gonna have access coming in that road unless
This
we address
road?
that.
You mean
Yes,
that
right.
road?
that
Behind the
road.
ball field, right there.
That's the
Right.
one.
Yeah. Okay, okay. So there's no access up from the site, really?
Well, there's very little, and then on top of that, you've got enough people there that are gonna be complaining
That's
when the
okay.
traffic picks up too, because they're the ones that are gonna be affected by this.
Right.
Well, we do have a school there right now, so we have a lot of parents driving in and out of there, so it's not like that's this pristine place. Granted, it's only certain times of the day, but,
And no one will remember that either.
well, that's true.
And they only come one direction, and they have parking spots set up, which will probably be
Right.
subsumed when you sell this property.
Right,
And do away with the ball field, because the parking will go away.
yeah.
It's on the street.
Yeah, just to come back to that ball field issue, that'll be interesting to wrestle with of, I mean, if it were, right, to have it be open to other open spaces, which might not demand so much parking, probably is an advantage in terms of use. You know, but if it were something were really important, like that could be something in the highly advantageous, like that you don't require it, but it'd be highly advantageous if you provide, you know. So those are things, there are little like nuances, ways to sort of
If the
encourage those things.
open area facing Wesleyan were, and I will use a probably inappropriate word, were inviting, and I say that meaning contextually out of place. If it were inviting, if it had an entrance or an arboretum or a trellis or open path to the neighborhood, it would be a very logical way to pull in the foot traffic from the neighborhood behind the Wesleyan Knowlton neighborhood into whatever the developer rings. So you have a lot, that's one of, you know, it's the center of town. It's one of the most densely populated neighborhoods in the area, and there's a lot of foot traffic in that area. So if the developer were to be smart about constructing some sort of, you know, paths or patios or walkways that will pull people in, that could definitely be construed as an advantage, because you're tapping into the residential area.
Right, okay. Any other disadvantages, like if, you know, if it were your money, you'd pick up and go somewhere else, or?
The disadvantage to the site, you don't know what the remediation for the building's gonna be.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Okay,
100 years old.
right,
I think the location of the site, it just excludes it from, say, you know, and this is both a disadvantage and an advantage, but national chains are probably
Right.
not interested in the Beal School site,
Right.
which is good for small businesses to get a foothold in there.
Right, and maybe good for your town character also to not have, I think you said no big boxes for sure, but maybe no chains either.
I think our language was large retail or commercial, single-story, single-use building was a no.
Like like a pharmacy, not to name names. but
That would
like-
take up the whole site.
Right, so that would be something that would not be acceptable.
Correct, I think that's what we were thinking when we
Yeah,
talked about it.
right, yeah.
We were thinking not like a CVS that just went out on Route 9, correct?
Yeah.
With a drive-through, which is also a no.
Okay, we can, as you can see, come back to any of these, but maybe just, so what do you think, actually, not only are you most worried about, but Nate's good advice, what do you feel like your constituents are most worried about? Or people that you know, your neighbors, what's the community most, and maybe it's some of what's on the prohibited list, or, I mean, are there other things, I mean, I also open this up to like, how long this'll take, or like, we'll never agree, or, I mean, I don't know, it doesn't have to just be physical attributes, it can be, or financial, or,
What if nobody bids on it?
that's a good worry, I always worry about that.
I think there's some discussion around whether this can be the catalyst to other development around the center and what opportunities might exist or not exist. So whether this will be, you build it and they come, or whether you just build it and nothing else changes around it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, one of the presentations, to go along with the discussion on this first of its kind to be built in the area, it's gonna be the standard that sets the facade of the front, and that's been a discussion at two of the open forums that they've had in town, is that do they want to specifically set up in zoning and code as to how the absolute design of that building is gonna be, so that it gets carried down towards the center of town or down further down towards Maple Ave. That's just something that would have to be decided and put into the RFP, perhaps, that there's gonna be some, if they reach some agreement on that sort of thing.
Right. That would trigger a worry for me, which would be that it's not done well. Like that the zoning may be written well, but for whatever reason, it doesn't get carried out well. That would be a worry, yeah.
I think we talked about design standards or guidelines, and that in this particular project, that the design would have to be peer reviewed by an architect.
Okay, yep.
I think a worry from the planning department at least is what if the zoning doesn't pass, then that quite limits what can be done on the property.
Oh, because the existing zoning is.
It's pretty limited.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because part of the feedback from my neighbors, and I live fairly, within a stone's throw of this place, is that the potential creep for zoning going down 140 to more businesses, where right now it's residential, and the expansion of that, which would all be incorporated in that, where you might have a great plan for Beal, but it may not be approved by people in my area because they don't want the additional zoning that was potentially extending, business down to, almost a
Right.
Patton school. As a part of a discussion in the open forum, so I haven't seen anything that comes out from that.
Right, so this is, I mean, right now, the school is the buffer between the commercial and the residential, and now that.
But if they change it,
No.
That's not true.
Going south, but not east-west.
East to west, no.
The commercial going to the right of the school as you're looking at it, there's gas stations,
Oh, I see.
donut shop stuff, so, no, but that actually, 100 feet back is really the buffer going south behind the school. It all turns residential.
All those white buildings you see
I
back there
see.
next to the ball field?
Yeah.
Those are all single-family residences.
Yeah, okay. So just but the worry of where the
but the worry of
commercials-
the road,
Commercial.
up in the upper left, you've got a road 140, which you can see, and that road, right now, the creep that's potentially proposed, and again, was an open discussion, so I don't know what's going on.
So we've had conversations past that we are very sensitive to the 140 South corridor, and we will most likely not be expanding the
I
district
just
down that
wanna let you
corridor.
know
We heard that
That's what
loud
my
and clear.
neighbors are talking
Yep.
about, that
We
they're concerned.
were going to encompass the existing commercial development on 140 South, which I think goes to the Jenkins building, and that stopping it there and allowing it to be residential from there south.
other things that you're hearing from your neighbors, or including things that people are excited about? I mean, I think some was captured in Nate's discussion in terms of this being something special, but anything that we haven't covered?
I think people are excited that it has the potential to invigorate the town center.
Right.
I think people are optimistic about the possibilities.
Seems like good timing, all in all, really, that you've got a new school built, so
Great
that
timing.
this can happen all in due time, right? Yeah.
Most of us that grew up in Shrewsbury went to that place at one time or another, and were more than willing to sit, wave goodbye.
I think
Yes,
people are
many
just,
memories, yeah.
just ready for something to happen in the town center. You just see or hear a lot of conversations amongst people. It's funny, in this world, you see it mostly on social media, but wondering when there's going to be some change and what the town is doing to help facilitate that change. And so I would anticipate that town meeting would be really receptive to hearing some of these zoning articles come before them, because that's really the first step in making sure that we're able to do something to start the ball rolling in the center of town.
Yeah.
From everything that I've heard from people, they would like to see it be more of a destination than it is.
Right. That's good. I'm glad you used that word, which we haven't quite used that word. And maybe it's helpful I mean, rezoning is never easy, but maybe just because the Beal is an opportunity, it kind of lights a fire under that, as you say, that this is why we would do rezoning.
I mean, we also have the benefit of a beautiful new library that everyone has seen the benefit of. And so that, I think, was the beginning of what a lot of people see as the vision moving forward. And so that was great that we had the opportunity to see that functioning. And I think that that is an inspiration for what we will see on the Beal site as well.
Right, so there's some confidence that we can do this
Definitely.
well. Yeah, right.
The other thing, I guess it's related to this, the whole thing of revitalizing bringing some vitality to the center, is the Town Center Association did a Yuletide Market, a one-night event that drew probably 2,500 people. The first time we've done anything like that in the center.
Right.
And everything about it was positive. And people, saying, wow, it's about time we did something in the center, we need to have more of this. So there is a desire for that to become a much more vibrant section.
Right.
Not just Beal, but going through the center, proper, so.
Yeah.
You mentioned that Yuletide event. We really do have a beautiful town common also, and I think that should
And
be
it was
listed
well lit through the holidays.
as a positive. The lighting was beautiful, but it just is. I mean, every time I drive through the center of town, I appreciate just looking, the way that you can look at the common and you see the trees and the walkway, and it follows through to the Congregational Church. It's just picturesque New England common. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. It has the gazebo, and it's just,
Yeah.
I think that's a real draw if you're looking at the center of town.
Right.
Yeah.
So somehow making this project not be like a isolated lump there, but something, to every point you've made, that it's tying together all of these things as well.
It was the first, when you asked the first competitive advantage, the word I said was, it should be considered to be the linchpin of the whole project.
The linchpin, exactly. How did I not get that word? That's good. But this
Mary
brings
Beth
it.
was the inspiration for the word.
Just waiting for you to say that.
But it's good, this all brings it to life. So does anyone, what if you could only have 3 asks of the developer or of the RFP? Like what if you could, so we've talked about open space. Let's set aside the Veterans Memorial. That's, can I ask a question? Is the Veterans Memorial the whole semicircle or just the statue there?
It's right there.
Right, it's the
And that-
middle of
that
that
little
right
triangle.
there. Yeah,
Sidewalk.
the
So
middle
we-
triangle of that green space.
It's just
right
that.
there,
Okay,
yeah.
so let's set that aside, because that's a given. What other, 3 things that you've, if you,
Street level's gotta be some kind of commercial. It's gotta
okay?
be some kind of commercial, restaurant, retail, whatever.
Okay,
But not all doctor's offices would,
not banks, yeah.
Right.
Active street level, so,
active street level.
Using Ms. Cassavant's word, destination. No one's gonna make an appointment to go to the doctor's for the day, but if it's a coffee shop or a restaurant or a lunch place or a breakfast place, someplace where you would go, some sort of destination.
okay.
Yeah, I think forward thinking in terms of, you know, what are we hearing the future will hold for gathering spots? So I think a developer that really has his ear on future trends would be really important. And I'd also mention, from a design perspective, to me, I would love to see it keep within the design aesthetics of the surrounding neighborhood, or to develop something that is going to be extended along Main Street. So that it sets the tone for a design aesthetic that will be continued.
Right, so it could be innovative, doesn't, if it,
It could, I mean, I love innovation, I think it would be
Right.
great, I would just want it, we are a New England town.
Okay.
We're not in Southern California, so.
Right.
If you think about downtown Wellesley, downtown Concord, downtown Acton, that kind of classic two-level, in some cases three-level, setback, not 20 or 30 feet, but 5 or 10 feet off the street with a mixed use, and then, doctor's office on the second floor or something like that.
yeah. You said Wellesley,
I think I said Wellesley, Concord, and Acton, but there's probably 30
Hudson
more.
is-
There's probably
Hudson's
30
making
more I
that
could say,
transition.
those are the
I'm
ones that
just
came to
wondering which
mind,
ones
yeah.
you did say, yeah. Wait,
Hudson's making the transition.
Yeah, there's many I could say, those are the ones.
that's good. So the open space is like well, you said it's not, but some open space in
No,
the
I didn't
back?
say the open space wasn't
The ball
important.
field.
I said
Ball field.
restricting it only to the ball field. We
Right.
definitely want open space in the back of that
100%.
parcel.
Okay,
Inviting open space.
Yeah, and that's my intent. I mean,
Yeah.
again, I'll smooth what I had to say. It was the ball field, because I refer to it, but it's an open space area that needs to be preserved.
That bridges the gap between what will become commercial and what is residential.
The buffer, that's important.
Buffer, right, thank you, Bob.
right, the buffer, inviting and a buffer. Can I ask the question about affordable housing in this group? So what's the mood on affordable housing in terms of some, all, some amount of income levels?
Do you think that's a restriction we would want to put on here?
Some towns do.
I just think, again, that's limiting.
So the way
No,
that
it's
the
limiting the
zoning,
slate.
the way the zoning is drafted is we're looking for at least 10% affordable housing if housing were to be a component.
Okay.
We have an inclusionary housing bylaw in our zoning that requires inclusion for any projects 5 units or more.
You have that now, or
We
it's
do have that
proposed?
now,
So
yes.
it's already in this.
Yes.
So we wouldn't even have to include that in the
We, but for the town center district, we are looking for 10% or greater affordability component.
Are we also looking for smaller apartments, i.e. 2-bedroom or less?
We can't do
Can't
that.
do that. Another story about that, but.
Is there any, in terms of like what you wouldn't want in terms of affordable housing?
I don't, personally, I wouldn't necessarily want to restrict it, but, there's been some talk about senior housing, which is sorely needed in town. But I think the issue of where the funding comes, not only to build it, but to be able to build it and be able to operate it at the kinds of rents that, we're talking about affordable senior housing, not 55 and over, because 55 and over, they could fill with no problem.
I
But,
see.
so I think on a site that small, I'm not saying no. It would be great if it could be incorporated as some kind of, second or third floor, some kind of housing that was, I don't know, workforce housing or whatever, something would be okay. I just don't, I don't know if the numbers would work on a site that small. Maybe they would, I don't know.
Yeah, not that small a site. Okay, so the housing, will maybe look to the zoning, sounds like wouldn't be the worst thing, but it might not be something you're definitely asking for, kind of.
I mean, I think there's a propensity in town for affordable housing. But I think this particular I don't think there's any desire for more affordable housing in this town. I don't think I'm going out on a limb and saying that. That having been said, the scope of this project, I would consider affordable housing
People that can't afford it.
nice to have, not a requirement of the project.
Okay,
But there is a zoning requirement.
Well, I think there's a big demand for
Yeah.
affordable housing for those who don't have it. For those who already are here and have already afforded it and don't wanna pay taxes to support everybody else, and maybe that's where the comment is, but I think there's always a need for it. It's a matter of what the zoning is, and you got a 10% requirement. Then
I think you
10%.
might have misspoke your first
Yeah,
statement.
the
You
first
said
one.
there is a need, you said there is not a need for affordable housing. Did you mean that there
Demand.
is a need?
Yes.
Okay, so you just
I
misspoke
think
your first
everybody knows
comment.
the hat that I
Okay,
wear, yes.
yes.
There is definitely a need for affordable housing.
right, right.
Thanks, Kristen.
You're welcome.
So I almost feel like with this particular project, you need to have some housing component because you want to have some people to support the businesses and to bring that foot traffic if it doesn't just organically happen.
Right.
So in that regard, to me, the priority is those businesses that are, because in my mind, it's a three-story building and there's businesses on the bottom and then something on the second floor and then somewhere there are some apartment, some sort of housing. I think as long as we, stick with the inclusionary zoning, that's adequate as far as what we're asking for from a developer, so that the priority does remain with the kinds of businesses that are going on the first floor.
Okay, okay. Okay. Other?
I just happen to be one of the Celco commissioners, which is the Shrewsbury Electric Light Commission, and I know that when you start building a building this size or doing development, we're gonna see people coming in, they're gonna be looking to see that they're energy efficient, whether they're net zero or they've got at least solar in the roof or whatever, but those kind of things have got to be considered. I don't wanna put any mandates on there, but it should be certainly a consideration that's given.
Okay,
Building codes will drive them into that.
That could be a most advantageous.
yeah, some of these sound like, right, how they slide around in those columns, exactly, right. Okay, what did we miss? Any other things? I mean, obviously, if there's things we forgot to, or you have thoughts when you go home, you can email them to Kristen. So actually, what do I know? I'm asking you question 4. Are there incentives that the town, actually, you mentioned that it doesn't need to, like, it could be tax neutral, for instance. I mean, that's an incentive.
That's not the goal.
What's that? Not the goal. That's one. Okay, it doesn't have to be maxing out, right? Or that's the sense that I've heard, is that, or from the committee, am I right about that? Like, you're not looking for the highest top dollar for this property. You'd be willing to
You talk
trade
about in
off?
terms of sale?
Yeah.
And taxes, that's.
Well, actually, sale and taxes, thank you for correcting me there.
So, I mean, that's a selectman
I think
question,
I
not a
can
committee question.
speak, at least for the board,
Yeah.
that, I think, Tommy, I mean, there's 4 of us here, that the strongest project would be the one that has the strongest potential spin-off for the rest of the center. Because I'm sure you could put something there that could generate a lot of taxes that would be an island unto itself. And that's not the point.
Right. So if it could leverage taxes and business everywhere, it would be more advantageous.
Right, but the whole idea is there's limited opportunities in the center of town, however you define it, with that kind of land to be able to do something. So, and people want to see something happen there. People say, why don't we have more shops like Westboro or Northboro, whatever? So, I think, again, the most advantageous is something that's going to and there's no guarantees, and I don't know how you would say it, but something that is gonna have the most, potential spin-off for the rest of the center.
Right.
Yeah, some of the incentives that we offer, again, I'll go back to the Selco side of the house. We'll have fiber that'll be available. We've already worked it down on Route 9 with the construction there. We were able to bring it in as an attraction to that. So, I mean, anything, any of the businesses, any of even the homes themselves, the apartments or whatever, to attract UMass student, whatever, I mean, they do that down at Route 9.
Right.
But they'll have that. Shrewsbury's got one of the lowest electric rates, third lowest in the state already. So, those sorts of things are attractions to anybody that's gonna, I think, that, as far as the value of the land and the like.
Okay. Other incentives, like in terms of streetscape, or is that budgeted in any way? Like, are you thinking that the developer will do all the streetscape there, or is that something that, you don't have to answer this if you don't know, it's like a question.
So this is Mass DOT right of way on Maple Avenue. It is it's Town of Shrewsbury and Chase Terrace, the other Hapgood and Wesleyan. Haskell, excuse me. So Mass DOT does require the Healthy Transportation Initiative with the Complete Streets. We're a Complete Streets
Right.
community. So I'm not sure what we can potentially offer on Maple Avenue without overstepping our DOT boundaries.
Right, okay, yeah, that's good to know. So, and then the sale of the land, really, the question is like, would you be willing to, you don't have to answer this, it's something to think about, like, have the land, well, let me just say, in other communities, especially ones that are not, where the market is weaker than here, the town would offer the land at a write-down. They would not be looking to have a return on the land, like basically giving the land for free as an incentive to get the best possible development. So I'm not
I see
asking.
a lot of head shaking.
But, I mean, realistically
Nice story, but
though,
I'm not buying it.
realistically, if somebody was gonna take that building and try to renovate it, it would be extremely expensive. And people I know in the development industry, as a matter of fact, one of our board members, who couldn't be here tonight, will tell you that, I think we're carrying that at like $3 million on the books or something like that.
In terms of
on the
value?
There's no way you're gonna get that kind of money, so.
Right.
I still think you go back to the holistic thing of what is gonna be the best thing for,
Right.
for the center. I mean, if you said, if we didn't get $750,000 for that property, we wouldn't sell it, you might not get any offers. Or if we said that you had to keep that building,
Right.
you might not get any offers. So, it's really, what's the benefit going forward?
Right, right, and getting the widest amount of responses.
It's not to say taxes aren't important, but, it's like what you're saying, what are the trade-offs?
Yeah, one of the things that I look at with that building that apparently people are willing to have go away, all I can think of is it costs money. Sorry to be looking at you. It costs money to make buildings go away. So I worked at the UMass, you know that.
I know that a lot, yeah.
And I worked at the UMass Medical, where the old mental health, was that 20 million or something? I can't remember the numbers.
I don't remember the numbers, but
To
I'm.
make one building come down.
I mean, I sit and look at that building and think as a public entity, that's probably 750,000 to bring the building down.
To tear that down?
Yeah.
Yeah,
If we tore it
As a
down,
public entity, yeah.
so I figured 30% or more cheaper if a developer did it. We're not gonna tear that down and make it site-ready.
Oh, no.
No.
I'm just thinking in terms of, it's all very well and good having a 4-acre site. But if you're not going to use that building, there's a cost associated with removing it that is not insignificant.
Right.
right, we call that negative value. I mean, this doesn't bring it to totally negative value, but there are discounts, right?
Right,
In terms of, someone else mentioned the remediation cost is an unknown. Actually, is there asbestos? You probably know that
Well,
from.
fortunately, it's a school, so it's been maintained pretty
Bob.
well, but
There still is?
and lead. Sure. So there's remediation cost and there's,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
yeah, and demo.
CVs,
100%.
So as we think
good
about,
stuff.
like, how much are we gonna get for this land, we need to account for those costs right up front to make it a ready site.
Right.
I
Now, Bill,
agree
you
with
didn't,
Mo. I think it's part of the overall, it depends what the overall proposal is.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
needs to be looked at in that context.
yeah.
I don't think you saw a lot of positive reaction to the idea of giving the property away. But, I mean, there's a tool that we've used only occasionally, and it's been used on much bigger types of products, so I don't even know if it, projects, I don't even know if it really lends itself to this. But I wouldn't be adverse to considering a tax increment financing, or say if somebody hits so many of the highly advantageous, I don't even know if you could develop an RFP like that, but if you hit a lot of the highly advantageous criteria, that then you might, the town might be willing to do a TIF.
Okay,
When John Masiello was first on this board changed composition, or this committee changed composition once or twice, he had that kind of express idea, so you're kind of channeling John Masiello right now.
Oh, I often do that.
I don't know if that's a compliment or not, but let's consider it one. He had said exactly, remember Bob, he had said, well, you know, what if a nonprofit wants to come in, we don't necessarily think they're high value, then they get 1 point, but if a retail on the first and, you know, office on the second would get 5 points, and when we first started talking about what an RFP might look like, well before this was in, he had said, you know, that's a potential way to structure this. Now, it's more complicated and it's possible, but it's certainly
That was,
something.
he was basing it on the, I think he used as an example, the building that became a bank
Bank
up at
from
Elm
the
Park on
firehouse
Park
down in
Ave.
Worcester, yep.
Used to be the alarm station.
On Park Ave, yep.
Next to the
He said that RFP was structured that way. You got points for doing certain things.
Preservation Society.
Now, again, that's a lot, it makes the process significantly more complicated, but it does give you the ability to steer it towards a certain outcome if you so desire.
yeah. Yeah, so that's what we'll try to do as we start drafting the RFP, is steering it toward the outcomes we want, not boxing it in too much, but sending as clear a message to the market as possible of what you do want and what's possible here. Okay, any other questions or thoughts? I'm gonna think about time also. Okay, this is kind of little, we should have handed this out to you. I think that these Gantt charts are really only good for the person who develops them. Because they help you think about like what the critical paths are, so I apologize that you don't have this in front of you. So I will highlight, if you bear with me in terms of like next steps and is the timeline, and I can add in, thank you for the zoning, so we can add that in. Okay, the red stars are critical paths. Oh, this is the draft RFP. No, issuing the RFP. Sorry, so we're gonna, look at it, Claire.
I'm holding her to the.
Yes, she's got me in a grip on. That means that we need to do a lot of work in a short amount of time to get.
I
Yes,
can
please.
interrupt for a second? That might be too early.
Doesn't it have to be after May for?
Because we're told by town council that the school committee, let's see if I get this right. Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong. The school committee, after the May election, would be the same committee, or the majority of it would be the same committee that could declare that the property would, that the school department would have no use for the property after the new Beal school is built. So to even try to put it, so we won't have control, even look like we have control of the site until after the May election. So you're already going to push that towards May or June. And if we're going to go to town meeting with rezoning, then you're definitely looking at June.
That's what I was saying, well, don't you need the zoning to be defined before the RFP goes out, Kristen, maybe?
No, I think, Claire, if you want to explain a little bit about the conversations that we've had in your timeline for the grant money, and then I can fill in after that, if you don't mind.
So Kristen and I had a lot of conversation about when town meeting will declare the property surplus and therefore authorizing the selectmen to entertain and dispose of the property. And one of the things that we talked about was that it's important for a developer that is responding to the RFP and proposing a due diligence timeframe to have some certainty that the property is available to them.
Right.
And so Kristen was able to work with Steve Madaus, town council, in order to determine that the sitting school committee in the year in which the property, or in the year in which the school will be vacated by the school department, that committee needs to be the same committee members who authorize that town meeting can take the vote to declare it surplus.
Right.
And so that cannot obviously happen until after the May election. So we were able to determine that an October or November or whenever the full town meeting is, could be the time at which the town meeting members are asked to take that vote to make the property surplus and authorize the selectmen to dispose of the property. So, working backwards from there, we wanted to issue the RFP such that developers understand that time frame and that vote is going to be taken in October or November, so that the proposals can be prepared by the development community and then analyzed by the committee that you authorize to analyze them. And then the town meeting vote occurs, assuming that it's a favorable town meeting vote, and then pretty much immediately you're able to then negotiate and enter into a land disposition agreement that gives the developer the ability to do their due diligence while the school is still in use. In other words, between that October, November town meeting and May or June when it will be vacated, that the developer will be able to start their due diligence during that period so that there's no time wasted. And, I think
Right.
one of the key goals of this project is that the town is not wanting to have a mothballed building on its hands.
Right.
So it's important that we keep these steps moving, and at the same time provide the certainty needed by a developer to be spending money
Right,
looking at the building.
right.
Does that?
Yeah, so the April date is the date that the RFP will be issued to the development community. What are you having as the date for it to be,
Selected.
to be turned into our town for review?
The RFP or the developer?
RFP. So it is issued out, the RFP is issued in April. When is it due back?
Okay, I'm in my mind wanting to,
Proposals will be due in
yeah.
Yeah,
July.
because
So
we
the-
we
so
could
the
we could have the
information
draft
session
zoning
in-
language.
Information sessions in May, the questions, then the developers have like 3 months to make their proposals and they submit by August.
Yeah, so they would have the certainty that the zoning went or did not go.
Yes. Town meeting is in
Yes.
May.
Yep.
But we wouldn't know,
We would put in the RFP perhaps that there's an anticipated vote at town meeting May 18th, 2020,
so we would,
with the draft language and our requirements for the land and the draft language.
so maybe
Or we would delay the RFP to May 20th to being issued.
Or do we delay those information sessions until?
exactly, they're
May
in,
20th,
they are here.
Because we
back
could
here.
do an addendum to the RFP if
Exactly.
needed.
That's what I'm thinking,
Yeah.
you're right, is that we give it our best shot in terms of what we think it's gonna be, leave room open to clarify and confirm in these question and answers and addendas. And then they have 3 months. And the only thing we should just debate about that is whether there's too much uncertainty about that. But but if we want to keep things going, that's the best way to go.
So the other thing that Kristen asked me to talk about, which I neglected to do, was the funding. And now the funding that we're working with is available through June 30th, the funding for this effort. I can push a small amount into the next fiscal year, but I need, this is a $25,000 effort. I can push maybe 5,000 into the next fiscal year, but I can't push more than that, really.
Right. Okay, so, right, and that last 5K or whatever is important in terms of helping the
Exactly.
town make the selection.
Right.
So having, say John Trematosi be able to look at the financials, and Nate's looking at everything else, and so that's happening here. So just working backward, I can't resist working backward, but tell me if this is confusing, is that the school gets closed here, which is in the middle of 2020. This is quarters actually here.
Yep.
And this is months, so I foreshortened this. So if the school closes here, this does presuppose that the construction begins right away. And that gets to Claire's point of like, we're trying to not have the building be mothballed. So in order for that to be true, the developer is having to design for, and do permitting for a year and a half, or year and a half. So that means that they do need to have that certainty before they spend that kind of money. They need the LDA, which is here in November. And so the town meeting, so if that town meeting a decision is made here, and we can do an LDA in November, I mean, this is all optimistic, but to strive for. And then that, if you work backward from that, actually working in both directions, this is the developer selection. And it really does take this much time to do these RFPs. In my experience, for instance, like doing the selection, having whoever the selection committee is actually like to review all the documents and to find a time to meet, and, all the back and forth, it really does, it's pretty realistic in there in terms of how much time it takes. So I think this schedule, which we can continue to update, is working both forward in terms of your zoning and town meeting, and backward from when the school is available for construction. Questions? Complicated. This particular case is a little complicated, tricky. We love a puzzle.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons Mass Development was so interested in working with the town on this project is to try to have this model of public buildings being efficiently disposed of so that they're not sitting mothballed for 20 years. Not in a situation where a building has to be demolished because it's a public health hazard.
And if we can't do that in Shrewsbury, where can we do it?
Exactly.
Exactly. So we want Shrewsbury to be a model for being able to do that efficiently. Okay. You're gonna meet with the Town Center Association?
Yes.
So I think June 24th, Bernie's gonna send out a final invite. Excuse me, January 24th.
So, and maybe you could, I'm not sure it fits with my schedule, but you
I
could
can
do a
handle
similar
this, absolutely.
conversation. And then I think we need to start drafting this RFP. is what
Right,
I
we wanted
understand.
to at least raise the issue of the selection committee, the review committee, so we're gonna be moving very quickly. So I don't know if there's been any discussion in the committee or with the selectmen about forming a selection committee, who would be part of that.
That's the selectmen, but I'm sure we would use staff and support to do that. I think the selectmen have to do that. It's not the Reeves Committee, it's not in the Reeves Committee's charge. I know that for sure.
Can you talk, Nate, and Catherine and Claire, a little about what the proposal says that you will assist the town in related to the selection? Because I think that's a little bit unique and it's excellent in our favor.
I know that we would help you set up the information session and answer questions. I think once they come in, I think it's really reviewing them and providing comments to the town.
Right, and we are here to provide technical assistance in that review process. But I think, you know, we want to maybe reflect on the goals of what you've stated tonight and ask yourselves, I mean, you're saying, so the Board of Selectmen could serve as the selection committee. Ask yourselves, looking at the priorities that you have, thinking about what Catherine's talked about tonight in terms of the materials you're gonna receive, do you have the capacity to do that? Do you have-
I didn't mean the selectmen would be the committee. I meant, I think the selectmen have to appoint the committee.
Right.
I wasn't saying the selectmen should.
So that's probably, so that's something that we can help you think through probably, is what type of expertise, which perspectives, and I'm sure you have ideas about that as well.
I think in terms of assistance, actually in the selection process, we've committed to that a member of the team would be available for the interviews, and for the final selection meeting as well. And obviously that Jan13, you know, would take a pretty high-level view, but really looking at it from a financial perspective to offer that sort of guidance.
And so we need the selection committee set up, I mean, definitely before August,
I mean,
but probably in time to look at the RFP.
Right.
April.
Yeah, I think it would be good to have the selection committee be wholeheartedly behind the RFP.
So
So
March,
really somebody,
February, March.
yeah, it's really something that is set up now rather than later.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, August is a little bit of a dicey time of year with people's schedules and family vacations and everything. So maybe there need to be a couple of alternate members of the committee if people haven't finalized their vacation schedules.
Right. And we can give some thought of what that expertise would be. Yeah, which we can forward to Kristen. And yours as well, from all your experience. Questions? Excited?
So in the near term, what would you be looking for the Board of Selectmen to do and the Beal Reuse Committee to do, other than soliciting their input today, provide, if they think of anything in the next few weeks? What's the process between now and issuing that RFP related to the review, so we can kind of see those short-term needs to assist the team?
I think you want to think about how you want to, with regard to the selection committee, for example, you want to think about how you want to invite people. So is that going to be, you know, just thinking logistically, is that going to be a letter from the selectmen? So somebody could think about beginning to draft that, or who's going to be responsible for drafting that. That'd be, I think, an important first step. And then, you know, just setting aside time on an agenda to have those appointments.
And then I know you're probably asking when we would see a draft, and I think that Nate and I probably have to discuss that, but, I mean, I think we need to start drafting this and, April, you know, maybe the end of February, have a draft to everybody? Thinking that might be a reasonable schedule.
Our March, April, and May are quite busy with meetings, just leading up to town meeting. So it's also a blessing and a curse. So having a lot of meetings means we might be able to slip you into one of our regularly scheduled meetings. But it also means we have to just balance what we have on those agendas related to town meeting actions or appointments or other actions.
Can you, we don't need it right now, but can you give us an idea of how many people would ideally be on a selection committee? I mean, you know, 7, 9?
That's exactly the two numbers I had in my head.
Go for the lesser.
See, I would have said 3 or 5.
5 to 7.
I was 7 to 9, they're 5 to 7, so.
I actually was gonna go more conservative, and I thought somebody said, I could have more than that, but, so somewhere between there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, not less than 5,
Yeah, definitely not.
5 to 7, yeah.
Okay.
Especially because of people's schedules and just getting together.
And you want to think about, stakeholders, and you want to think about expertise, to which you can combine those. So folks who are professionally and personally invested in the town center, and may also bring, whether it's architectural or legal or development or real estate, financial expertise.
Yeah.
So another thing, Kristen, that I think it would be good for for your office to be thinking about right now is how much, what sort of timeline and what sort of review is required by town council,
Right.
and how that fits into the time frame for advertising in the central register.
Yeah.
Because again, I know that town council's probably very heavily involved in all of those other
Yes,
meetings as well.
yes.
Oh, yeah. It's like everything coming together. As well.
Be popular.
I was just thinking who would be on committee. Is some people that you'd want on a committee would probably be conflicted because they might be developers, or they could be engineering firms that they may end up,
Bidding on it.
it potentially, it could be a potential customer, so, or just,
Yeah. Would be good to get some real estate experience on there.
Yeah. I mean, would that be part of your invitation, is that, this is the understanding, and, we do this as well, as like my firm is an engineering firm, and, we have to think about what commitments we take on
Right.
at point A in the process, because at point D, we might want to, be part of that as well, so.
right.
It's part of the game.
We don't need to decide all that tonight.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'll stay in touch with
Thank
both
you.
committees with the schedule and whatnot, and thank you.
If anybody has questions or comments, maybe the best thing to do is to send those to Kristen. She can be our point of contact. And then she can
Yeah.
go between.
And thank you for a great conversation that really, well, it gets me into everybody's understanding of the town.
Thank you.
And if anyone wants to go to the Town Center Association meeting on January 24th, it's at 8 a.m. So all are welcome, right?
We have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Some move second.
All in favor? Aye. That was for both boards.
I don't know if we were supposed to be voting.